Part 2 ending of Above Her, Part 1 down below. Sometimes, even I can't tell these are fictional or not, and sometimes you guys comment down below that they are fictional when I know they are real. Sometimes, life is like a story, you can't tell if it's real or not. Anyways, back to the story. The election was getting hotter. Though there were still 10 months to go, initial surveys had Stanley leading by a narrow margin, close enough to raise eyebrows. His contributions were coming in rather steadily, and he was saturating the media with print and commercial advertisements. My company had expanded significantly. Sometimes I wondered if it was because of my political connections, but I had no control over my marriage partner. I attempted to fire any clients who made overt references to larger contracts as payment for my alleged influence. They stopped as soon as they saw I had done a great job at a fair price. Now that I had 4 crews operating in separate places, I seldom ever lay cable anymore unless it was absolutely necessary. In general, I oversaw and managed. Eve encouraged me to raise a family and was happy of my accomplishments. One day, I called her into the restroom, shocking her. I said, "Watch as I emptied her birth control down the sink." After crying for 2 hours, she looked up popular baby names online. That evening, I received really nice love. Eve met me at the door 3 months later, tears running down her cheeks. I believed that someone was harmed. I tried to get her to tell me what was wrong while I held her. At last, she raised something she was holding in her hand. I lowered myself on my knees and pulled her along. We were going to be parents. Before long, my tears were equal to hers. We had to wait 10 minutes before we could get up and head inside. The following day, she made her mother accompany her to the doctor. She and Greta went immediately to Celeste's shop and told her once he verified it. Work ceased altogether. The whole family found out soon after, and we celebrated with a picnic in the meadow. Amy was, I believe, happier than everyone. She was just 10 years old, and she made it clear that she would never talk to us again if we used someone else to watch her when she grew older. Eve informed her that she was hired. Even drafted and signed a brief contract. She mounted it on the wall of her bedroom after framing it. I performed in a Stanley commercial. For him, it was the most successful one to date. It was me, dressed for work, operating my Ditch Witch. I snapped it off and turned to face the camera. Behind me stood approximately a dozen of his campaign posters. Stanley Wallace. With a serious tone, I declared, "Yes, I will vote for him. He has a significant advantage over his rivals because to his programs for small business owners like me. He is aware that we are the nation's backbone and that the state would collapse without us." I spontaneously added the next section, assuming it would be cut out, but to their amazement, it was kept. Said it gave him a little more humanity. In addition, he is my in-law's father. Should I not cast my vote for him, my wife would murder me. He handily won the primary. Stanley was outperformed by his opponent, who received over 50,000 more votes than Stanley. His camp was concerned that he would actually win in November if he could produce those kinds of results in a primary. He increased his advertising until all of the local networks carried at least one of his commercials every hour. His opponent had never remarried after divorcing years prior, therefore she was single. This distinction was highlighted by his team, who portrayed Stanley as a devoted family man. To support the image, Greta, Eve, and I were hauled along on numerous appearances. It quickly became very stale. I pulled back, even though he was not happy. I had a business to run and wasn't running for office. After being with me for a few days, Eve's father contacted and, despite my protests, she went back to the campaign route with him. Initially, she would call every night. Later, it would happen every few days. His weakest region, the western portion of the state, was the focus of his attention. When I would see them on TV, Eve and Greta were both getting paler and thinner, and their grins were the most artificial you could imagine. I raised my voice. 6 weeks remained until the election, and his rival led by 4 points. I don't think he slept for more than 3 hours a night, and he was expecting the same of everyone around him. He was going wide open. Eve was getting tired of the pace at 6 months along. I tried to take Eve home when I unexpectedly went to the town where he was giving a speech. "Honey, enough is enough. You are exhausted, and I worry that this won't be healthy for the infant. I don't care if your dad wins or loses at this moment. Come with me home, and I'll start a fire so we can cuddle. I'll light some candles and give you a bubble bath." She was huddled up against me, clinging to me as though I were a lifesaver on a capsized vessel. She refused, which surprised me. "Honey, I'm not able to. I told my father that I would live with him until the election. There are just a few more weeks left before everything ends. We'll be okay, I'll be back home, and it'll all be over." That was the last thing I wanted to hear, and the way she looked at me didn't help either. They were an animal's eyes stuck in a cage. "Eve, pay close attention while I speak. I dislike your appearance as well as your behavior. Something seems to be hidden from you. Tell me what's happening while you look me in the eye." She refused to look at me and held me even closer. Greta entered, having, I assume, been warned by one of the flunkies, spotted us together, and paled. That struck me as being negative. "Greta, please give your daughter some common sense. She doesn't seem well, and I'm worried for the baby. Tell her to accompany me home. Consider your granddaughter." It was a girl, indeed. Her support for Eve's decision to stay startled me more than anything. "Please, Tommy. Only a few weeks remain. I'll see to it that she receives her vitamins and sleeps. It will soon come to an end, and we can resume our lives. I didn't want to pursue it. No, if he prevails, he will be preparing for re-election in 2 years. If he loses, he will immediately begin to plot his revenge. We lose in either case. Now, we're heading home. Eve, hurry up and let's get you packed. Panicked, she glanced to her mother. Just as they opened the door to exchange words, Stanley and his security detail entered the suite. Hey Tommy, what's this about taking Evie home that I hear? It's simply not feasible at this time. Her demographic indicates that many women relate to her, particularly because she follows the family path. Act sensibly. Either head home quickly, or better yet, stay with us. For a few weeks, your teams can take care of themselves. I was astounded by the man's insolence. Hell no, Stan, did I mention that he detests the name? But not at all. My wife and child's health are more important than any workplace in the world. We're about to head out. Discussion is over. Rather than respond, he gestured for everyone to go save for his security personnel. 4 males, all former military, 2 rather large. I heard Eve say, "Please, Daddy, don't," as they closed the door behind them. When he turned, there was an unpleasant expression on his face. Listen, even if my daughter were foolish enough to wed him, I'm not going to have some hillbilly ruin this campaign. I must prevail. I need to live up to the many promises I've made to different people. It could be a sweet existence, if you think about it. I'll put you in charge of a job that pays well and has lots of benefits. I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. Pay close attention to me, Stan. Whether you win this election or not doesn't matter to me. My wife and child's safety are not worth it. I don't want to hear you bash me for taking her home. I'm going home. Please don't press me on this. I'd hate to inform the media that the legendary Stanley Wallace is willing to jeopardize the health of his only kid and first grandchild in order to become governor. That would be very popular in Nowheresville with Marge. And that's when it became weird. Eve, go out, Greta. I have to give this hick an explanation of life's realities. Despite their tears and beseeches for him to stop, the 2 tiniest security guards grabbed them roughly by the arms and escorted them outside. Eve appeared to be an animal stuck in a cage. Please, just please, honey, remind yourself that I adore you. Would you please? When they closed the door, she was still pleading. I had pursued her right away, not standing by while all was happening. The 2 largest thugs turned on me. When I turned and gave him a headbutt, I believe I startled one. The second one just buried his fist in my stomach while he staggered back. I was a furious spouse, not a warrior with any martial arts training. I tried to fight back, even as I lay on the ground gasping for air. The man I had a headbutt with gave me a strong kick to the balls. It rendered me unconscious. Trapped into a chair, I awoke. Stanley drew another chair in front of me, gave me a heavy slap on the head, and lifted my head. Good to see you awake. You have no idea how long I've wanted to accomplish that. You are hated by me. My aspirations for Eve were to marry the ideal man and bring happiness to the whole family. Then Joe Redneck shows up and ruins everything. Still, there's a possibility for you to rescue everything. There are certain voters that favor being a redneck. He smiled and gave me another slap. Gosh, I could enjoy that all day long. All right, now that I have your focus, let me explain what will happen. You're going to be on every stage with me tomorrow and for the duration of the campaign, waving to the fans and grinning. Recognize. If so, you may return to your small, unimportant life after it's over. Naturally, not with Eve, but if you're good, I'll periodically permit your child to visitation. He was beaming broadly, clearly taking great pleasure in this. My fury was indescribable. He laughed. Really? You're not going to tell? I could say that I have some insurance, or leverage. Keep an eye on this. He raised his phone and played a video clip that completely changed my life. Somewhere in a room was Eve. Stan was audible in the background. There she was, her growing tummy visible. As promised, she is here and prepared to serve. Can I thus rely on your assistance? The man in his late 50 seconds was shown naked when the camera panned. I mean, if she's just as good as she was the last time. Please come up here, darling, and tell me again why I adore your dad. The camera focused on Eve's face as she was forced to her knees. She was repeatedly mouthing the word no while tears were running down her face. He hung up the phone. You already know what happens, so you don't need to witness the rest. This is how it will operate. Nobody should be able to see this or understand how much of a whore your wife is. Consider the infant, it might be yours after all. So tomorrow, you and I should be up on that podium, waving and grinning. If you want me to keep it hidden, you can go back home when I win. Eve may even wish to accompany you back. I'll be done with her, at least until the next election, so I don't really care. Recognize. Just so you know, if you get in trouble with me over this, I'll tell the police about the items your people put on your computer and ensure that you never see your kid again. My cheeks was flushed, my eyes were swollen, and my heart was beating faster than before. I've never experienced anger and heartache quite as I did now. I felt a cold calmness wash over me. I intended to destroy him rather than kill him. He would never again be a public official, possibly even go to jail. I knew that I had had enough of the entire family. Now, the only thing that mattered was getting even. Stan's gaze grew strained. He gave me another slap. From the look in your eyes, I know you're considering doing something foolish. Consider this, I would really hate for Eve to get into an accident. God, back then, I wanted to murder him. I enjoyed fantasizing about slowly beating him to death and relishing each hit. I have a lot of footage that you don't ever want your family to see, but it will somehow go up online if you do something foolish. Naturally, I will be devastated by the fact that you encouraged her to lead such a bizarre lifestyle. I also pledged to support her during her rehabilitation. It's true that your only choice is to comply. It will soon come to an end, and I'll still find you a nice job that keeps you hidden from me and the public." Then he committed his error. Oh, one more thing. He struck my ribs with his fist. Everyone heard it break. Pain I had never experienced swept over me. Damn, that felt good. I was lying down, gasping for air. It felt like hours that they left me hanging, strapped to the chair, yet it was probably only 10 minutes. At last, one of the security officers saw my gasps for air and the frothy blood on my lips. A lung was perforated by the rib. My own blood was literally drowning me. They decided to call the EMT, but it still took them 20 minutes. They took their time to give me some serious bruises before dropping me off at the base of the hotel stairs. I was maintained sedated during the procedure and placed in intensive care. When I did wake up, the nurses and doctor were quite confined around me. The physician attempted to clarify my wounds. "When you fell down the stairs." "Doctor, BS. You can tell I was beaten, if you're a doctor at all. You'll be testifying during the trial, I expect." As I said, your fall down the stairs did a lot of damage. The doctor refused to look me in the eye. "Your fractured finger should mend nicely in the splint that we have on it, and you are wearing a light cast. In a month, if you only follow the nurse's directions, everything will be well. We will detain you for a few days in order to ensure that the healing process is completed. Do you need anything from us? Just buzz." I was growing very irate. "I want my phone back. I have some calls to make. And what happened to my clothes?" HR extended her arm to tamp my IV. "At this very moment. Recall to maintain your composure." When I passed out, I tried my hardest to yell for aid. I was given medication for 6 days. People would come and go, and I could not stay awake long enough for a nurse to feed me. I opened my eyes and thought clearly for the first time on the 7th day. A young nurse was observing me. She somehow reminded me of someone. "You don't remember me, do you?" I was terrified that she was going to put me back to sleep as I watched her play with my IV. She muttered as she leaned up close to my ear. "It's entirely salty. Within a few days, the medications ought to be eliminated from your system. You were there when my sister with a disability was able to maintain her career. Had she not, our home would have been lost and my mother would have had to resign from her position. Is there anything I can do for you now that I won't have to answer for? There are guards stationed outside, and we are searched both entering and exiting the room. It doesn't seem absolutely legal to me, but I'm not sure what's going on." I attempted to dispel it by shaking my head. I knew what to do at that moment. I kept repeating the same number to her until I thought she had learned it by heart. "Give this gal a call. Instead of using your phone, get a borrowed one. Inform her of my whereabouts and the situation, and request that she come fetch me as soon as possible. She will understand what I mean if I tell her to bring Jerry. I'll keep you out of it, don't give her your name. But act quickly. As soon as you can, get started." A disturbance occurred outside my chamber 18 hours later, accompanied by a few shouts, some moans, and the door being swept open. Vivian and a man with whom I had been on a committee the previous year came through the door. With me, the doctor was feverishly changing the IV drips valve. I had maintained the pretense, acting bewildered and unresponsive. I smiled as I looked up. "Give it up, doctor. I'm fully conscious. You have no idea how delighted I am to see you, Vivian. I urgently need a blood test. What they've been adding to my system is unknown to me. Oh, and would you have Jerry detain everyone you see? Jerry, you'll do that, won't you?" Jerry, the chief of the State Bureau of Investigation, said he was holding everyone for questioning until he worked things out. However, he would like to do that same thing. I discovered that I was in a private clinic catering primarily to weight loss patients. They grabbed hold of everything. Seeing her situation, one of the nurses made a deal and began to sing like a bird. Jerry isolated them all and forbade them from communicating with anyone outside of the group while he handled the accusations. Vivian was furious. "I've always known that he's a cunning snake. I'm going to enjoy seeing his entire world come apart. Eve must be found, and you must be kept safe. I'm afraid the apple doesn't fall from the tree, Vivian." Then it dawned on me. The emotional suffering had been put to the back burner by the physical pain and the uncertainty of my future, but it was back on track now. Eve, my future self and the love of my life, was gone. Perhaps she was never really that, but like Stanley, she was shrewd enough to hide it for all these years. In any case, she was permanently lost. So I wailed like a baby and screamed in anguish for 30 minutes, and Vivian held and rocked me during that time. She escorted all of us except for Jerry out of the room as I summarized my observations and the film I had watched. Vivian looked into my eyes as she cradled my head between her hands when I was exhausted. "Tommy, I've known Eve for a very long time. Nobody is as talented as you, which is why she loves you. I can feel something is really wrong. Have you paid attention to her justification? as she expressed her lack of affection for you. She pleaded with me to hold off on passing judgment until we had a chance to speak. When I told her I hadn't had a chance to speak with her and wasn't sure what to say if I did, I told her, even if we do talk, I can't get that video out of my head. I'm not sure if I can. How could she possibly explain that with words? Honey, I have no idea. You must swear to listen, and we must see her. Will you? I thought about it for a few minutes before saying that I would, if nothing else, to confirm that the union had truly ended. We have to move swiftly. Stan was unaware that I was free, and I'm sure he had a frequent reporter checking in on me. Jerry accepted my complaint so that he could look into it legally. He might be accused of 3 things, at the absolute least. He sent someone right away to retrieve the materials on my computer after I informed him about their potential threat. Someone called the FBI. They decided to let the SBI take the lead and, once he was in jail, add the federal charges. I was really able to move very effectively when I was sedated and confined to bed, as long as I didn't try to move quickly or bump against anything. That cell phone and as many of his campaign computers as we can must be taken. How many people were aware of what was happening? Please. I was completely ignorant. Definitely his security detail. I have no notion what's beyond that. Speak with his daughter and wife. Jerry was focused only on his work. Stan was not well liked by the police. They discussed ideas. The plan was conceived by Vivian. In order to prevent distractions during his presentation, Stan placed his cell phone in a suitcase that one of his security detail members carried. Tomorrow, he had a rally to attend with state employees. They would serve Stan and his group and seize all cell phones once I showed up to scare him. They hoped he would panic and do something foolish, so they wouldn't arrest him. Instead, they would merely say he was being investigated. The following day, I was driven to the rally. I wanted to stand upright when I addressed him, so even though I was extremely sore and in a wheelchair, I brought a cane. They kept me alone till the end of the speech and the start of the Q&A period. He had all the correct responses, and there was nothing impromptu about them. They were all prearranged. At the very end, they wheeled me out. Packing up had already begun at the press. When I stood up, the SBI agents made room for me. I limped all the way to the platform's edge. I yelled, "I've got a question," you sob, despite the fact that it hurt like crazy to my ribs. Where in the world is my spouse? He genuinely got pale and turned to exit the platform after being outdone by his political allies. 8 SBI agents, armed with warrants, greeted him. The media was in full swing, demanding answers and yelling questions. I believe Stanley realized at that very moment that his political career was dead, but he was too naive and fixated to admit it. Until the man with the briefcase made a break for it, sprinting over the platform and diving into the throng, I was essentially ignored. Sadly, he dashed straight towards me. I waited while gripping the cane like a bat. He attempted to veer off when he saw I was there. That person was the one who gave me a ball kick. I gave him a forearm smack. He dropped the case, and everyone nearby heard the crunch of the bone. Even though his arm was clearly fractured, he attempted to pick it up. It was a really horrible idea for me to hook and pull him around the neck because it sent him crashing into me, and then we both fell on top of each other. I got to experience the thrill of a cracked rib once more. All I could do was lie there until the pain took over. After the agents found us, they took hold of him and the case and assisted me getting back into the wheelchair. These large rallies usually have 1 or 2 ambulances, so they arrive quickly, but not as fast as a reporter. He asked me what had happened while shoving a microphone in my face. While this occurred, I said, "He did this to me." He was moved aside to make room for the ambulance by the police. As the drugs took the edge off, someone recognized me and blurted out a question to the assembled gathering. The man is a serpent, willing to go to any lengths to win office. Okay, that was a bit excessive, and I should have said sodomize, but my intention was to create a dramatic impact. From the rally stage, Jerry made a message for the media. Wallace is currently the subject of an investigation. He went from neck and neck to having virtually no chance of winning in just 4 days. Analysts were projecting his opponent to win handily. I was being held under guard. Since he would know who was expected to be present, the SBI asked the sheriff to lend my brother Fred, a county deputy, out for security reasons. Celeste, the boys, Amy, and his entire family moved into my home. As much as she could, Vivian was there. Amy and her were watching me. Amy once noticed me crying while clutching our wedding photo. I didn't respond when she talked to me. By now she was 11 years old and beginning to resemble Celeste more and more. Her hands were dragging me around as I felt them on my face. Even though I'd long ago shaved off my beard, it was still the same gesture. I'm positive Aunt Eve didn't act in that manner. You do too, deep inside. You'll see, she'll return home. You couldn't stop her from seeing her. Uncle Tommy, please have faith in me. The malware was discovered on the machine. Numerous fascinating pieces of information were gleaned from the PCs and smartphones. It appears that Stan was using hidden camera footage of a select group of supporters in questionable poses for years as a kind of blackmail. There were no additional images of Eve other than the clip he showed me. Nonetheless, there were video footage showing Greta dating 6 distinct guys. She appeared scared or stoned in every instance. A week before the election, his party condemned him and withdrew support, realizing it was too late to save the day. Shortly after, he attempted to flee the country and was apprehended. Upon understanding he would be facing 50 years in office, his campaign accountant struck a deal and performed like a diva. The campaign manager and 2 members of his security detail shared the same fate. Jerry actually stopped making deals because so many people wanted to cut deals. A helper possessed a negotiating advantage. Eve and Greta were both known to her. I hadn't been attacked in more than 2 weeks. Jerry searched for them with everyone on hand, but he was unable to locate any trace. They were in a 2-state private rehabilitation center. Vivian told me, and I went with them when they went to pick them up to question them, even though she pleaded with me not to. The FBI took the lead since they were out of state. 4 teams, along with Jerry and a portion of his crew, turned up with warrants. He was present both as guests and to detain them so that they could be questioned and determine whether extradition was required. They appeared out of the blue. Meeting them, the director asked them to come into his office. He stated he had nothing to hide and they could look anywhere they wanted, but he wanted the company attorney to be there to check over the warrants and keep an eye out for liability reasons. The supervising agent was courteous, but had worked long enough to see through stalling. He faced his crew. Go ahead and start now. If someone tries to stop you, detain them. Alongside the excellent director, I'll wait here for his attorney. Vivian insisted on going, so I was waiting outside with her. She called a news conference in an unusual and contentious action as the media started to speculate about the extent of my possible involvement. Everyone who has had the opportunity to know Tommy Yount agrees that he is a good, moral man. I now think of him and his spouse as my adopted children. For years, my spouse and I have cherished our friendship with him and his spouse. I firmly believe that he will be exonerated of any evidence of misconduct related to this affair. I'm grateful. She and I had served together on 2 committees, and in the event that her husband, a prominent private practice lawyer, was not available, I frequently took her to different events. He was the one who introduced me to golf and laughed when I got hooked. In this situation, he served as my official counsel. After a substantial donation to his pride and joy, he buried the publication under so many lawsuits that they did a complete retraction when one tabloid claimed that we were all part of some sort of powerful swinging gang. The local lawyer involvement, a nonprofit organization including attorneys from all specialties who accepted cases on a pro bono basis, provided free legal counsel on matters ranging from divorces to wills, and generally informed the public about the law and their roles in it. They even worked in soup kitchens and assisted with park cleanup. Every major town in the state has a branch since it had grown so popular. I was appointed to the founding committee because John liked me and I was brought in as a layperson. Typically, every out-of-town meeting concluded with a round of golf. Then Vivian saw them. 2 ambulances with the clinic's emblem stealthily pull out of a parking lot. Before they had gone a mile, the FBI had them halted when she called Jerry right away. Greta and Eve were in separate rooms. The computers and clinic records were taken, and the director was taken into custody right away. Secluded and sedated the entire time, they had remained there since the day after he almost murdered me. Later on, the director faced charges that included recklessly endangering the health of a pregnant woman and her unborn child, which is illegal in that state. They were cautiously brought around and closely observed. She was out when I walked in to visit her. I watched her sleep while leaning on my cane. She was slender and pallid. Her hair looked dead. I had a flashback of her dancing about the kitchen singing to the baby, her hair flying and her eyes brightening. Gazing upon her growing tummy, which was now 7 months along, I pondered whether the child would survive and whether it belonged to me. I knew that if I spoke or tried to touch her, I would lose it. So I remained silent. As it was, I had trouble seeing because of the tears. I gave Greta a check. I had always liked her, the way she would watch us together and smile quietly, the tears she let fall when we gave her the t-shirt that read, "I'm too hot to be a grandmother." It was Eve's way of telling her that we were going to finally have the granddaughter she had always wanted. She appeared tormented even while she slept. I started to wonder what type of covert life she had been leading all these years. The tale continued to grow. Ultimately, in addition to Stanley, 13 business people, 2 state representatives, 1 federal congressman, 3 judges, 5 lawyers, 10 call girls, 3 members of his security detail, his accountant, his campaign manager, both doctors and various nurses, and the leader of the party were all indicted. Jerry was terrorizing the sinners, comparable to an enraged angel. He always found someone else to blame when someone was arrested. The largest political scandal of the 21st century, according to the Wall Street Journal. Many articles were written demanding that career politicians be fired and that all culpable parties receive the worst penalties imaginable. Vivian was present when Greta and Eve were overthrown. She emerged once it was over, fussed over Amy for a while, and then she took me for a walk. I was given a transcript by her. I can't bear to tell you, so you'll just have to read it. From the moment of their marriage, Greta had suffered cruelty and was practically Stanley's slave. I felt so nauseous from some of the things he'd had her do that I passed out. He required a family image, which is why he only allowed her to have Eve. He used cautious pharmacological use and ongoing psychological conditioning to keep them under control. Eve was just an adult the first time he asked her for a favor. He was lonely, impoverished, and divorced at 75 years old. She began to rebel at that point and experiment with drugs and alcohol. He essentially had staff clean up her messes and keep it out of the news because he couldn't precisely make it public and risk criticism. She believed she had distanced herself from him when she entered college, but at 20, he used coercion and blackmail to entice her back. In order to obtain leverage against the men he paired her and Greta with, he would regularly film them. His obsession with taking notes accelerated his demise. Evidence of corruption dating back to the start of his career was present. When she met me, she had finally let go, telling him she had nothing to lose even if she lost me. Greta was included in the arrangement, and for over 4 years, everything in their life had gone according to plan. She went along to defend her mother even though she truly didn't want to run for office. They did okay while I was there, but he reaffirmed his will and drugged them all over after I left. They struggled, but ultimately he was in charge. When I went to get her to go home, everything fell apart. Rumors would have begun if he had allowed her to leave with her mother. On tape, he, his campaign manager, and 2 members of his security detail discussed letting them leave, citing their first-time pregnancy and a worried mother as justifications. It's possible that they were filming them at home and supporting him. That plan was scuttled by the campaign manager, who reminded Stan he had pledged things he had to honor in order to win over supporters. I think I detested the campaign manager more than Stanley at that very time. Eve felt well enough to start requesting me. I declined because I was still incredibly wounded and enraged. Vivian pleaded with me. She needs you. You were her anchor, her comfort, her vindication that she was a good person that was loved just for being her, with no agenda. Please, Tommy. For me, please. I gave her a hug. You've been a surrogate mother for me. You know my parents died in an accident when I was in my late teens, and my feelings for you made me realize what I missed. Do you know we had decided to name the child Vivian Greta, for her mother and mine? Vivian's eyes were full of tears. I can't, Vivian, not right now. If she needed me so badly, why didn't she stay home? Didn't she realize that anything he had on her would hurt him far worse than her if anything came out? What could have made her do it? I got smacked by Vivian. You, that's what made her do it. She couldn't take the chance that you would leave her if you found out. I know, it doesn't really make sense to us, but you have to remember, she wasn't thinking clearly. The mental and physical abuse, the drugs, the shame, made her desperate to keep it from you. You're her world, Tommy, the only good thing that's happened in her life since she was born. Through her eyes, she saw that she was fading. At least think about the baby. That's your child she's carrying. Doesn't she deserve a good life? My voice betrayed my pain. What about me? Do I deserve any of this? And I do think about the baby. What if it's not mine? Worse, what if it is mine? You know I'll get custody. I don't think a judge alive would let her raise a child alone with her history. I got a bruise on my arm from Vivian's forceful hold. Don't ever say anything like that where she could hear it. That baby and the hope that you may forgive her is all that's keeping her alive. Please, Tommy, I've never asked you for anything again. Please. Later that day, Celeste came to me. I'm going to see her. I want her to look me in the eye and tell me why she betrayed you. Maybe it'll ease the pain for both of us. Amy is begging to see her, but I won't let her, not yet. I'll call you later. Celeste spoke with both Greta and her. She mentioned that her psychiatrist wanted to speak with me, but she never really elaborated on what they discussed. She claimed that she was practically pleading. Celeste, Amy, and Vivian united and harassed me for 3 days until I gave in. I believe that by establishing certain ground rules, I astonished them all. This is not about me. If I get the least sense of an agenda, or if she tries to steer me in a direction I don't want to go, the conversation is over. I reserve to refuse to answer any question, but will not give her the same courtesy. If she refuses to answer, the conversation is over. Make it clear to her, and if she still wants to talk, I leave, and there will be no second chance. And make this really plain to her. She is to bear no message from Eve. None. The doctor needed 2 days to decide whether or not to accept my requirements. I believe she was taken aback when I forced her to come to my house instead of her office. I ensured we were by ourselves. I didn't provide her with any snacks. I asked her to sit down on the couch. Well, first, Tommy, thank you for seeing me. You have a lovely home. Thank you. And it's Mr. Yount. You're not my friend, you're not my doctor, you're a salesman, here to sell me something I probably don't want. So, let's keep it formal. I'll make it easy for you. What do you want? Her face flushed. She was forced to make quick decisions and try to communicate her needs to me without upsetting me because I had essentially closed her typical path of action. It took her many minutes to make up her mind. I'll come right to the point. Eve is not holding up very well. We've gotten the drugs out of her system, but she's not improving. She needs you. I've spent a good bit of time with her. You're her rock, her vindication that she was a good person and deserved happiness. By taking that away, you're destroying her. If it weren't for the baby, I'm afraid she'd be suicidal. Please, you don't have to talk about the future, you don't have to commit to anything, just be there. She needs you, Tom, or Mr. Yount. Expectantly, she waited. Let me ask you something, doctor, since we're talking about your patient. Am I covered by confidentiality rules? Can you discuss anything I've said or will say today with anyone? She concurred that the topic of the talk was covered. When I went off, I could see the look of disbelief on her face. You know what, doctor? I'm tired of being told what to do to ease Eve's pain, what I need to do to get her better. You know what else, doc? Screw her. I'm sick to death about people telling me to help her. Did I ruin the union? Though I didn't quite smash the door in her face, I came very close. It felt nice to get it all out, even though I felt guilty afterwards because she had been drugged and kept against her will. Perhaps I should go to therapy myself. My lawyer approached me at this time, so I hadn't been inactive. Time to safeguard your possessions. Recall the prenuptial agreement we fictitiously created. Though it was satire, that doesn't make it any less lawful. He froze all her assets. Citing the prenuptial agreement, I reminded him to tell her that all she had to do was admit her adultery and she got it all back, but it had to be done publicly, in a way of my choosing. She refused. I remembered that I didn't want the money, but it was a way to make her admit she had betrayed me. Greta was no longer in the hospital and was living in seclusion at a posh clinic that handled cases of abuse and trauma. She wasn't even limited to the premises, though it was discouraged. When I opened the door after hearing a knock, I saw her kneeling. Hello, Greta. How are you spending your time? Tommy, please hear me out. You must visit her. They are feeding her through tubes since she has stopped eating. Concerned about the infant, are they? Tommy, I'm a broken lady. I am about to lose my family. I have nothing, no future, and no respect for myself. You know I'll do everything for you. Anything to keep my grandchild and daughter safe. Tommy, please, please. I lifted her and carried her inside. Greta, you're not alone. I've always felt you'd make the ideal grandmother and have always admired you. Whether she says anything or not, Vivian genuinely cares about you. I read what you said. You had nothing to do with what occurred to you. My heart was broken by it. I'll be here for you at all times. Everything you require. You must save not just your wife and child but also my daughter. Please let me accompany you. I psychologically collapsed, the lady I loved and my child's health in jeopardy, and I hurried her into the car. The pain was just too great. Pale and skeletal, her 8-month tummy appeared excessively large in relation to the rest of her body, giving her a ghostly appearance. I had thought that my heart could never hurt again, but I was mistaken. She had been put under light sedation and had her arms bound to prevent her from pulling out the feeding tubes or IVs. During the drive over, Greta told me a lot. I just held her hand while she sobbed softly and tried to think of ways to make Stanley's existence on Earth the worst it could be, every day until he died. The doctors decided to let her wake up, to see if my presence would help her come around. But I couldn't help it. The tears began, so I pulled up a chair and held her hand with one, caressing her cheek and hair with the other. Greta woke up quietly, holding one hand as I slept with the other. I woke up when she tightened her grip, as if to make sure I was indeed there. The tears began to fall. One of the nurses carefully took out her feeding tube while she was trying to talk. She spoke in a croak. What about Tommy? Tommy, I require. I pulled her hair back out of her face and planted my fingers in her lips. All that has to be done is for you to recover. We're going to be chasing our daughter around shortly, so you'll need to be strong enough to keep up. I'll release you from these constraints if you swear not to do something foolish. I really must give you a hug. She was screaming, Greta was crying. The two misty-eyed nurses helped take off the restraints, and since she was so weak, I had to bring her into my lap, where I held her closely while she cried for 2 hours, only placing her back in bed when dinner came. It looked like baby food, soup made of pureed veggies and mashed potatoes, topped with gelatin for dessert. She tried her best to clean the dish while I fed her, vowing to kiss her after each bite. She did manage to get one item out, but every time she tried to talk about what had happened, I stopped her, saying we would talk about it when she got her strength back. I had a rocking chair brought into the room, and after dinner I held and rocked her, giving her every kiss I promised, and a few extra. Tommy, I never cheated on you. Because of this, even though the evidence was rather incriminating, I would not uphold the prenuptial agreement. I got into the practice of making sure Celeste, Greta, or Vivian was present because she would get quite irritated if I had to leave her eating everything that was put in front of her. We let Amy see her, and after 2 hours, not a dry eye in the room, not even mine, was left. She had pretty much stopped sobbing. They gave each other a strong hug. I feared we lost you, Aunt Eve. Never, ever do that again. Aunt Eve, you are loved. In fact, Eve gave her comfort. I'm here, darling, right here. And I promise never to be apart from you or the rest of the family. I swear. I have seen enough tears, please stop crying. I decided to leave them alone after she held her hand and talked for over 2 hours about everything from boys to baby names. I brought Greta and Vivian to the coffee shop down the street, where they gave me an update. There is a grand jury. If Stanley is found guilty of half the accusations, he will die in prison. He'll have plenty of friends around him, though I doubt they consider him to be one at this point. Since we are the victims, our counsel have persuaded the district attorneys to hear our evidence in private. If I felt it would gain him another year, I'd do it on network television, but Eve has to be considered. Will you provide a statement? I extended my hand to grasp Greta's. Indeed, as loudly as you can. That guy needs to be cooked. Her water broke as we were leaving the hospital, and she tightened her grip on my hand. The baby arrived 2 weeks early. Turn around, Tommy. I was unable to comprehend. Have you forgotten anything? Yes, I did forget that I was pregnant. Honey, she's coming. Come on. I grabbed her and ran back through the doors because I was so terrified out. The child is on the way. All that the duty nurse had witnessed. Paul Revere, put her in this wheelchair so we can get on with our work. Come on, you might as well. It appears that she won't have to wait very long. Let us help you get dressed. She was in labor for less than 3 hours, and the entire time she held my hand while screaming and yelling. With a lustful scream, Vivian Greta Yount entered the world at 1:55 p.m. proving her vocal prowess over the years. She was the loudest child I had ever witnessed. Eve merely stared in awe, then looked up at me, but they let me cut the cord, took her, washed her, and gave her back to me. I had the tremendous privilege of putting my daughter on my wife's breast, and she soon discovered her nipple. I stroked her hair and knew, at that very moment, that everything would be okay. You still owe me 2, but I believe we should wait for the next one for at least 2 years, okay? Her eyes said louder than words could. In the waiting room with me was my entire family, Greta, Vivian, and, shockingly, Jerry. Everyone gathered in the nursery. When it was time for feeding, the women walked into the room and Greta was the first to hold her, then Vivian, Celeste, Amy, and finally they had to almost pull her from Amy because she really didn't want to let go. Eve spent nearly 2 years in therapy, both with me and alone. She continues to see her every 3 months. It wasn't all sunshine and roses. For a long while, we were really uncomfortable with one another. When things became tight, we made it a routine to walk into the baby's room and leave generally holding hands. We also made a daily commitment to always talk to one another and to fully trust one another. We had not made love until Vivian was nearly 7 months old, but when we did, it was lovely and incredibly satisfying. Our intimacies rose in intensity, and soon we were almost back to where we were. It was slow and timid, as if we were frightened the other might break. Greta had also been in treatment for a long time, and she had made the astute decision to keep her money apart. Stanley was okay with this, believing that her money would save him in the event of a crisis, but that didn't quite work out that way. After a year, she began dating Jerry. He moved in 6 months later, and they got married 8 months after that. Talk about connected, Vivian and John became her godparents and were quite involved in her granddaughter's life. Her grandmother was the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, and her grandfather was the Director of the State Bureau of Investigation. After 20 years of service with the Sheriff's Department, Fred resigned. I made him a full partner, and he now manages the company. I started a new job. Jerry proved to be a bulldog, never giving up once he caught a scent. The political fallout from the scandal was huge, lasting a long time as new facts came out, harming both parties. Over the following few years, there were more emergency elections. To replace Stan, they nominated a political outsider, but he was so incompetent at the end of his term that his party didn't even give him a nod. Because there was an independent candidate, the election was rather well contested. Me. During the first interview of the main season, I was interviewed. I was clueless as to why. You know, there were financial motivations for fighting the American Revolution. Unrepresentative taxes, political careers, etc. The purpose of the Constitution was essentially to deter professional politicians. After leaving the business or plantation, you were expected to return home, leaving it for the next guy, and do your best. You now have over 90% chance of getting reelected unless you do something incredibly foolish, like Stanley Wallace and his allies did. Once again, the system is faulty, and I don't see how to fix it. The interviewer was curious. So you're saying in a perfect world there would be no career politicians? I doubt it would be a perfect world, but I bet it would be a lot better. He refused to let it pass. So, in a world like that, you'd run for office. I chuckled. Possibly. However, I would be the worst politician ever. I'm too forthright. I made a big error by assuming that no one would read it and that even if they did, they wouldn't be interested in it. False. I was getting calls from strangers asking whether I would run. I firmly declined. Then, one day, my former political team appeared out of nowhere. Jerry Smith, Zane Williams, Billy Grant, and Thad Emerson, of course. To say I was taken aback would be an understatement. Upon observing their smiles, I felt uneasy. Hello guys, it's been a while. What's going on? Thad smiled. You are, sweetheart. Do you think you would make a good state representative? I gave them all hugs and said please come in. We made up ground. Billy taught political science at a minor university located in a different state. Jerry and Zane owned a think tank where they examined candidates' chances of winning elections, primarily for their own parties. They have a 93% success rate in the past. Scandals and the candidate in question's withholding of information were the main causes of their defeats. They did some study and purchased a tiny investigative agency for their own purposes only. As a political advisor, Thad frequently leaned on his pals for assistance. He had overseen the campaigns of 2 congressmen, 3 senators, and 5 state leaders with success. In addition, he had overseen the campaigns of other mayors in significant cities. He had an 11-3 record. Warmly greeting them, Eve recalled better times. They cherished the infant. Zane had one, Billy too. Thad had no kids and was divorced. Jerry did not have a committed partner and identified as gay. On the question you posed earlier, hell no, not at all. After everything that world had put us through, why in the world would I want to return? It seemed they had given this some thought, because it allows you to demonstrate to others how to do things correctly. This is a fantastic chance to return the people's government to them. Don't immediately say no. Instead, discuss it with your closest friends and family. Check out their opinions. What stands to lose for you? I'd given it some thought, too. Go to sleep. Mental tranquility. I'm sure you've read about our experiences. You truly have no concept what it was like because you weren't present. I looked across at Eve. Surely you don't think this is a good idea. She gave me a very intense gaze. I believe that's a really great idea. If no one steps forward to show our children that there were good individuals out there attempting to improve their future, what kind of society will this be for them? It would be a great personal benefit to me, like making up for previous transgressions. Sort of balance the books for my family. I never would have imagined that I would be having this talk. They persuaded me to ask around after a few hours. Vivian liked it very much. Jerry, Greta, and John all did the same. My family felt it was a great idea, Celeste in particular. It was 3 weeks later when Thad and the group arrived. We have to form a party. Why? I questioned. Why can't I just run as an independent? Jerry explained everything to me. The incorrect message would be conveyed. You were a part of a community of like-minded people even with the Grant fight. To get them to come out, you have to offer them something to believe in. Without it, you'd come across as a bitter recluse. You wouldn't stand a chance. Eve listened intently. I sometimes forget how politically astute and intelligent Mom was. They are correct. After careful consideration, I have some recommendations, says she. Everybody was listening. You basically said in the interview that it was a bad idea to become a career politician. Expand upon that. Promote the notion that a guy should only have one chance to do the right thing before stepping aside to make room for someone with a new idea. Expand upon that. She let out a sigh. Besides, I don't think I could stand the thought of being a politician's wife for more than one term. Thus, we launched the One Chance Party after adopting her concept. Before building a website, Bill launched a viral campaign, sharing small portions of our hypothesis online. The idea was quite straightforward. A member who was a politician at the state level or higher was required to swear to serve just one term. As a voting member, you were required to swear allegiance to no more than one candidate running for office. That easy. Serve with respect and pride, and depart with honor and dignity. It turned as our catchphrase. Naturally, Eve's funds were used to finance it. We could spend as much as we wanted since it was just a grassroots movement, not officially registered, and there was no candidate running. After a month, we went public and registered, announcing my candidacy for the position of state senator in the 9th District, having gathered the 25,000 signatures required to form a party. The political elite was taken aback by it and rushed to stop it, but they were unable to do so because of Thad's group, the LLI, and John at one point. They did not make much of an effort, viewing us as a nuisance in the wake of the federal scandal surrounding the Tea Party. Our lawyers were meticulous in their attention to detail and kept us in check. Although we had the seed money, donations started to come in quickly. Everyone who wanted to donate was told that any amount above $100 would be listed on our website so that anyone could quickly know who our supporters were. John, Vivian, and Greta made the most donation that was permitted by law. One of our initial donors, Amy, sent $25 through Celeste using the money she earned from babysitting. I was allowed to attend and take part in any debate because I had registered. Despite always being third, I made the most of it. I was quite silent during the first debate until the Republican pressed me, asking about my plans to address specific state issues. First, probably not much at all. I want to use the first year as a learning year. I'll probably create a lot of noise after that. I questioned them about their party records in a subsequent debate. My Republican opponent was addressed as Sir by me. On a national and local level, your party supported the straight ticket 8 times out of 10 last year. Do you concur with that assertion? Since it was well known, he had to. The partisan laughed. I looked up at him. And you, sir, your party can likewise be verified to have voted the straight ticket 9 times out of 10. Do you concur with this assertion? It was something he had to acknowledge. So, sirs, I have a question. Who was serving the interests of the American people if you were both working for your parties? The clapping stopped the argument when they could not come up with an answer. The celebration was expanding exponentially. Branches were established by other states. We took great care to ensure that they accepted our party's principles. I was running a campaign and did a small amount of radio and television commercials. Thad had selected a crucial word from my previous discussion. He plastered it all over billboards. Who is employed by the people of America? Make an inquiry of your elected representatives by calling them. Visit onechanceparty.com if you're not satisfied with their responses. Our numbers increased and the hits were incredible. Greta and Eve supported me throughout the campaign. At first, they were concerned, but I persisted. The majority of their historical information has already surfaced. They must see you in order to convey to everyone that, despite your regret for the past, you are focused on the future. I'm not ashamed of either of you, even though it might sting, and I genuinely will need your support. Greta was really helpful and had spot-on insights. Even in her forced situation, she had learned a few things and had not spent all those years as a political wife. Jerry and Vivian had to remain away, obviously. Didn't stop them from supporting us and showing up for dinners. I immediately explained to the media that the past was just that, the past. When it came time for questions, the people who had spoken anything or asked any questions at all ended up at the bottom of the list. They quickly stopped after realizing the point. Now that Amy was in junior high school, a mock election was organized. She went all the way to the school board to protest after learning that the One Chance party had been left out, and this attracted the attention of the local press. Amy ran after the school was made to permit the celebration. With 60% of the vote, she prevailed. For us, the advertisement was invaluable. Ultimately, I emerged victorious, having been proclaimed the winner even before 75% of the precincts were completed. Ultimately, I received 80,000 more votes than my party's registered members. We received a lot of attention from the national media. If you recall my term, I made headlines by exposing corruption and waste and by refusing to make deals that didn't benefit my district or the state as a whole. Despite requests from all over the state, I did, in fact, return home when it was all done. With grace, I declined. I emphasized the pledge I made at the beginning and thanked everyone who had faith in me in my parting speech. Our small party was a recognized third party that operated nationally. After permitting 2 state and 2 federal candidates to rerun under the party banner, 1 state was discredited. Billboards featuring the candidates with the term liar over each of their faces went up all throughout that state, enticing people to visit the website and see the pledge papers that the candidates had signed. They were all defeated. 2 went back to their previous parties, and 2 stopped appearing in public. Did it make our system of government better? The judge will have to be history. I went downstate to a medium security prison after leaving the office. The fact that he had added me to the visitors log caught me off guard. His hair had grown out and was nearly white, and he appeared leaner. I knew he'd been banged up a few times. People knew he was a tough on crime. Because of his policies, there were undoubtedly prisoners in every jail in the system whose sentences were extended by a few years. He moved across and took a seat. The mark on his face was obvious to me when I saw it. It seems that he had gotten close to a lifer. They remained a couple even after 3 years. He sneered, but there was no genuine hatred in it, saying, "Come to gloat, finally." Not at all. It will be too soon if I never see you again. I think you're the lowest of the low. I used to hope for your death, but now that I've given it some thought, I'm happy you'll live out the remainder of your days here. I wish you many more years to live. I exhaled. I was sent by your wife and daughter. I was asked to show you something by them. I produced a picture of Greta and Jerry from their cruise for their 2nd anniversary that was taken on the beach. She looked quite fine in a bikini, even at her age. This could have been you, jerk, if you had shown her the least amount of love. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't even flinch. This is your first granddaughter, Vivian, I said, holding up a 5x7. It featured an image from her 3rd birthday. Attempting to plaster her mother's face with birthday cake, she was sitting on Eve's lap. Both of them were chuckling. She was now older than 4. I presented another picture of a young child dozing on my lap, shortly before his 2nd birthday. Thomas Yount, too, your grandson, is this person. We refer to him as Deuce. I showed out another official photo of Eve with the children, her 7-month baby bulge visible. I gave the sonogram to him. And Amy Celeste, this is your 2nd granddaughter. Eve wanted you to see these and know that, in spite of everything you did to her and her mother, they were able to find happiness and normalcy in the company of fine men. I stood up to depart because she wanted you to know what you could have had if you had been a great person. She had asked me to stay, and I was not going to stay any longer. As I turned to go, I heard something. I took a look around. He continued to cry while seated at the table. He looked up, and he begged me to leave the sonogram and the pictures of the kids in a sad voice. I began to say no, but then realized that would just make him feel worse by reminding him of what may have been. Every picture I sent him was plastered on his cell wall when he passed away 7 years later. When Eve found out about his passing, she declined to go see his cremation or claim the remains. What they did with the ashes is unknown to me. My comment, she never warned her husband after all those years. Drop her. She didn't call the cops. She didn't help her supposed husband. She doesn't deserve it.